The moment you stop fighting for someone else's attention, you begin to reclaim your power. And that power is exactly what makes a man miss you beyond reason. You cannot force longing. You cannot manufacture desire by leaning harder, calling more, or trying to prove your value. The moment you do that, you shrink yourself. You twist your identity around someone else's inconsistency, hoping he sees your efforts. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. People only value what stands firm, not what bends in desperation. There is a law, almost psychological in its precision, that governs human attractiveness on we miss what we believe we can lose. And when a woman becomes silent, steady, composed, and self-contained, she positions herself as someone who does not need to be chased, but someone who deserves to be pursued. That is when the dynamic shifts. That is when he starts to feel the emptiness your presence used to be. The first silent rule is simple. Pull back without announcing it, not in anger, not in revenge, not to manipulate, but to recover your center. Emotional intensity clouds judgment. It makes you reactive, not grounded, and a reactive woman is easier to take for granted. You quietly remove your emotional availability, you create space. Space is where longing grows. Space is where a man begins to realize he has been consuming a luxury he never stopped to appreciate. The second rule is even more powerful. Direct your focus toward your own life with ruthless consistency. A woman who continues to check her phone every 2 minutes to see if he responded is not living, she is waiting. And waiting is the opposite of value. The moment your daily actions shift back to your goals, your routines, your discipline, something profound happens inside you. Your internal old becomes richer, and a richer internal world creates external gravity. Men feel that. They sense when you are no longer emotionally orbiting them. That shift stings them in places they do not admit out loud. The third silent rule demands emotional composure. When a man pulls away, do not panic. Panic is a message. It communicates fear of loss, and fear of loss communicates dependency. But composure, the ability to stay calm, stay grounded, stay intentional, sends a very different message. It says you are not negotiating your value. You are not pleading. You are not auditioning for a role he hasn't offered. You are simply living, observing, and allowing his actions to tell you the truth. That calmness is magnetic. It is unsettling. It forces reflection in the mind of a man who thought you would always be there. The fourth rule is the one most people avoid because it is the hardest. Allow consequences to unfold. If he disappears, let him disappear. If he takes you for granted, let life teach him. If he stops trying, do not compensate for his effort. Every time you rescue a man from the discomfort of losing you, you teach him that your presence is guaranteed and nothing guaranteed is. Ever cherished. Longing comes from the recognition of risk, and he cannot miss you if you refuse to let him feel the weight of your absence. But these rules are not about manipulation. They are about identity. You cannot practice silence effectively if your self-worth is fragile. You cannot all back with strength if your entire emotional balance depends on whether he texts you. The root of real power is not strategy. It is self-respect. The woman who is feared losing is the woman who has a life outside of him. The woman who is missed deeply is the woman who refuses to collapse into sober else behavior. The woman who holds her value, even when he forgets it, becomes unforgettable. Missing you is not about your beauty, your effort, or your loyalty. It is about the gap you leave when you are gone, and whether that gap exposes what he failed to appreciate. Men do not miss They do not miss anxiety. They do not miss constant availability. They miss presence. They miss peace. They miss the woman whose life feels like a standard they cannot find anywhere else. When you follow these silent rules, something changes inside him that he cannot hide. His mind revisits moments he overlooked. His heart recognizes the consistency he lost. His ego wrestles with the truth that he misjudged your strength, and suddenly the silence he once interpreted as distance becomes a mirror, showing him what his life looks like without you. And when he realizes that life is emptier, quieter, duller, that is when he misses you. not out of need, but out of recognition. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Not because you chased him, but because you finally stopped. If you want a man to miss you like crazy, then give him the space to feel what life is like when your energy is no longer holding him up. And give yourself the space to remember that you were never meant to be an option. You were meant to be a standard. It is the moment you stop explaining yourself to someone who has stopped listening. It is the moment you stop overextending for someone who has stopped appreciating. Silence is not a punishment, and it is not a game. It is an internal shift, a quiet uprising where you decide that your dignity matters more than someone else's temporary attention. People misunderstand silence because they confuse noise with connection. Noise is frantic, needy, chaotic. Silence is clarity. Silence is strength. Silence is the point where you draw the line between who you were when you tolerated disrespect and who you are becoming now that you choose yourself. Most people speak to be heard, but silence speaks to be understood. It forces the other person to confront their own actions without you cushioning the impact. When you fall silent, you are no longer performing emotional labor on their behalf. You are no longer trying to fix misunderstandings that they caused, nor are you scrambling to restore balance that they disrupted. Your silence removes your energy from the dynamic, and suddenly, sometimes painfully, they feel the emptiness where your presence used to be. That absence is not a void, it is the truth rising. Silence is powerful because it stops the cycle of reaction. When someone disrespects you, disappoints you, or undervalues you, your instinct may be to respond immediately. You want to explain, you want to defend, you want to prove your intention. But every rushed response drains your strength. Every emotional reaction feeds the imbalance. Silence does the opposite. Silence interrupts the pattern. It halts the emotional bleeding. It gives you time to breathe, to evaluate what you truly deserve instead of reacting to what you are being given. A person who expects you to always be available will struggle with your silence. They are used to you making things easy. They are used to you carrying the emotional weight. They are used to reacting out only when they want something. Silence breaks that pattern because it sends a message that cannot be ignored. I value myself enough not to chase. That message is unsettling because it shifts the power back to you. It reminds them that your presence was a privilege, not an entitlement. Booba Tea silence is not about making someone miss you. It is about making yourself whole again. It is choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and dignity over desperation. When you fall silent, you are giving your soul space to heal. You are giving your intuition room to speak. You are letting our boundaries solidify. Silence is where you meet yourself after you've given too much to someone who gave too little. And when you return to yourself, you become stronger, steadier, and less willing to accept half-hearted behavior. People often break their own silence too early. They fear being misunderstood. They fear losing someone. They fear being seen as cold. But silence is not coldness, it is alignment. It is the refusal to participate in chaos. It is the refusal to keep explaining your worth to someone who refuses to see it. If your silence causes someone to drift away, let them drift. You should never fear losing a person who is comfortable losing you. Anyone who genuinely values you will feel the shift. They will step forward. They will correct their behavior. They will realize that your silence is not anger, it is truth. The beauty of silence is that it separates the real from the temporary. The ones who care will confront the silence with effort, sincerity, and maturity. The ones who don't care will hide behind excuses, defensiveness, or indifference. Silence reveals the truth without you having to say a word. It identifies who is willing to meet you with respect and who is only interested in convenience. Your silence is also a form of self-teaching. It teaches you patience. It teaches you restraint. It teaches you that not every situation deserves your reaction. It teaches you that emotional discipline is far more powerful than emotional intensity. Silence helps you A stand that your worth is not measured by how loudly you fight for someone, but by how calmly you can walk away when you are not valued. And here is the part most people overlook. Silence is not empty. It is full of decisions, full of boundaries, full of realizations, full of strength. Fuba LL of the voice you ignored while you tried to keep someone else comfortable. In your silence, you finally hear what your inner world has been trying to tell you. You deserve reciprocity. You deserve consistency. You deserve someone who values your presence so deeply that the thought of losing you, TBR, terrifies them. Silence is not the end. It is the beginning of a new standard, a standard where you no longer beg for clarity, a standard where you no longer justify someone else's neglect, a standard where you no longer negotiate your value. Silence puts you back into your power because you stop reacting to the world and start directing it. And the truth is simple. The moment you choose silence, the dynamic changes. They start to wonder. They start to question. They start to sense the shift. But your goal is not to make them chase. Your goal is to protect your peace. If they come back with effort, maturity, and honesty, your silence worked as clarity. And if they don't, your silence worked as protection. Silence is not absence. It is a declaration of self-worth. And once you learn to speak through silence, you will never waste your voice on the wrong person again. Anyone can walk away in anger, disappear out of frustration, or pull back out of fear. That's not strength. That's reactivity. Real power comes from distance that is intentional, grounded, and controlled. It's the kind of distance that doesn't scream, doesn't threaten, and doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply exists as a stabber tenement of self-respect. Emotional distance is chaotic and inconsistent. Disciplined distance is clarity, and clarity is what forces a person to finally confront what they have been taking for granted. When distance comes from emotion alone, it looks like inconsistency disappearing one moment, retuber RNing the next, trying to provoke a reaction or hoping someone panics. But when your distance is disciplined, it has purpose. You are not trying to punish anyone, you are regulating yourself. You are restoring your balance. You are stepping back, not to test them, but to protect your peace. That kiba nd of distance is steady. It doesn't waver. It doesn't collapse under loneliness. It doesn't change depending on how someone else behaves. It is the boundary you hold because you honor yourself. Disciplined distance forces you to slow down and observe. You stop trying to decode every mixed signal. You stop rushing to fix every emotional disruption. You stop putting yourself in situations that drain you. Instead, you pay attention to patterns. You let their behavior reveal their intentions. When you step back with discipline, you shift from reacting to evaluating. And in evaluation, you regain the objective. Viti that emotion steals from you. You see who they truly are, not who you hoped they would be. Distance gives you the perspective you can never find. When you re-entangled in someone else's chaos, and what happens to the other person when you create disciplined distance. They feel something they haven't felt in a long time, the absence of your energy, not your anger, not your accusations, not your demands. Your energy, the calm presence, the emotional support, the reassurance, the consistency. People almost never realize how much they rely on your emotional presence until it quietly disappears. Emotional distance can be dismissed. Disciplined distance cannot. Emotional distance looks like a mood. Disciplined distance looks like a decision. And decisions demand respect. A person can ignore your tears, but they cannot ignore your silence. They can brush off your frustration, They cannot brush off your lack of participation. When your distance is calm and focused, it disrupts the dynamic. Suddenly they notice you are no longer available on demand. You are no longer adjusting yourself to their inconsistencies. You are no longer trying to force connection. They feel the SBR shift because disciplined distance removes the fuel that kept their comfort intact. And when comfort collapses, awareness rises. But the real transformation happens within you. Distance teaches self-control. It forces you to confront your own emotional habits, the impulse to chase reassurance, the NBRE to be validated, the fear of losing someone who isn't afraid of losing you. With discipline, you train yourself to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You learn to choose your long-term self-respect over your short-term emotions. You begin to understand that longing is not a reason TBRO return, and loneliness is not a reason to tolerate disrespect. Disciplined distance builds emotional muscle. It strengthens your boundaries because you stop breaking them for people who don't value them. You start prioritizing your well-being over your attachment. You start giving yourself the attention you once begged from someone else. And slowly the emotional storm inside you begins to settle. You stop and see your worth not as something that must be proven, but as something that must be protected. That is the internal freedom. Distance gives you the freedom to choose yourself without ABR apology. Distance used correctly is not about withdrawal. It is about recalibration. It allows you to realign with your values, your needs, your standards. It gives you room to breathe, to think, to heal. You remember what it feels like to be centered rather than stretched thin. And from that center-bare place, you gain the strength to make decisions based on truth, not emotion. You begin to detach from the fantasy and see the reality. And often, reality is the thing you avoided facing while you were too emotionally involved. For the other person, disciplined distance has a different effect. It RBR equals T. Air investment. It shows whether they step in or step away. It shows whether they value the connection or only value the convenience. A person who genuinely cares will feel the shift and adjust. They will show effort. They will reach out with sincerity. They will recognize your silence as a signal, not a threat. But someone who never intended to give you more will simply fade, and their fading is your clarity, the clarity you could never gain while your emotions were making excuses for them. Distance is not about making someone chase you. It's about giving yourself the chance to see who is willing to walk toward you without being pushed. When your distance is disciplined, it becomes a filter. It filters out the inconsistent, the half-interested, the emotionally unavailable. It leaves you with truth, who is willing to meet you and who only wanted access without effort. In the EBRND, distance becomes powerful when it is disciplined because it makes you the author of your emotional world. You are no longer reacting to someone else's unpredictability. You are choosing your responses. You are choosing your boundaries. You are choosing yourself. And when you hold that level of internal discipline, you no longer fear losing anyone because you finally understand that losing someone who doesn't value you is not loss at all. It is liberation.